The next City Skylines 2 developer diary and feature highlight video have dropped, this time covering city services. I seriously think I like everything that has been announced in this diary, and all of the new services have exceeded my expectations. The TLDR version, city services no longer need or should be spammed, service mechanics have been overhauled for most service types, a couple of new services have been added, services are generally more realistic in terms of size, operations, and functionality, services can be upgraded, services now have passive benefits, services can be traded with neighbors, and neighbors generally play a large role in City Skylines 2. District creation will be cleaner, easier, and make more sense. And policies are generally more clear than in City Skylines, but there are far fewer of them. But there's a ton more to each of these topics, so in today's video, we'll deep dive into the diary, then we'll go over the feature highlight video to see what we can decode, and I'll let you know my reactions along the way. So let's jump into the developer diary. First up is City Services, and one of the biggest changes between City Services and City Skylines 1 and 2 is how you will cover your city with them. In the original, the goal was to blanket your city with city services pretty much evenly throughout the entire community. In City Skylines 2, the system has been refined so you have the ability to improve services and increase the coverage ratio. With that in mind, the impact that providing a service can have on land value has changed as well. In City Skylines, you'd sometimes see a neighborhood stop leveling up until a specific service was placed, and then have everything level up as soon as it was placed. That will no longer happen in City Skylines 2, since services only indirectly impact land value. And finally, different citizens will value and need different services. For instance, seniors will place value on places to spend their free time, families will value being close to schools, and working-age citizens will value having quick access to their workplaces. Generally, I think this is going to increase the complexity of the game in a good way, and I appreciate the nuance in City Skylines 2. Next, the diary goes over service types, and to begin, we have a confirmation of a major change in the functionality of roads. As many of us thought, basic utility infrastructure is pre-built under the roads, including water, sanitary sewer, and power. And I love this. Now every city in the game will have these right underneath the road, right where they belong. And along with confirmation of electricity running underneath the roads, we now know that the game comes with 7 different power plants, including wind turbines, solar power, geothermal power, hydroelectric, coal, gas, and nuclear. This means that many of the base options from City Skylines are available, with the exception of oil, which has been replaced with gas, which I think is a great call. Further, geothermal is now available in the base game, whereas in City Skylines, it was available as part of the Green Cities DLC. The only power plant that has not made its way to City Skylines 2 is the advanced wind turbine, which is the one that had to be built on water, and honestly, I think that's fine. And finally, the diary mentions that citizens will leave their homes quickly if they don't have power, and that's interesting because they won't necessarily leave quickly if they don't have water. I've just got to say it, these new power plants look amazing, particularly the solar power plant. I love the scaling of these, it's just a ton better, and I love that all these buildings are upgradable, but more on that later on in the video, and a ton more on that after next week's update. The water and sewage mechanic has been overhauled in more ways than just automatically including pipes underneath roads. For freshwater production, surface water can be pumped directly from bodies of water just like in City Skylines. However, to extract water from the ground, water must be pumped from areas with groundwater deposits, similar to how water is pumped from aquifers in real life. And similar to real life, these groundwater aquifers are highly susceptible to ground pollution, so water supplies will need to be planned early with consideration given to where your industries will be placed. Similar to the original, you could choose to pump your raw sewage into an open body of water using an outlet pipe, or you can treat the water using a water treatment plant where it is purified and now pumped back into your freshwater network. The solids acquired through this process must be processed at a garbage management site, such as a landfill. Finally, it appears that citizens, businesses, and services can live without water, simply becoming unhappy or less productive. And in my opinion, the new water treatment facilities look so much better than in City Skylines, and I really appreciate the added depth to placing the facilities. I feel like this is a significant improvement that will make the creation of a water system much more gratifying and fun. But there's more to this mechanic, we'll be learning more about it next week. Health and death care are mostly unchanged from City Skylines, with a couple of significant exceptions. First, when a citizen is sick, they impact their workplace's efficiency, resulting in less profits for the company. And second, citizens can now die in car crashes. City Skylines 2 comes with a health research institute, though little is said about how it actually works. I'll be looking for more information on this in the future. And I think the system for healthcare and deathcare is an example of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The core logic behind healthcare and deathcare in City Skylines was sound, so I'm fine with it not changing. As mentioned in previous videos, the processing numbers now appear to be much more rational, and it'll make it easier to plan out your systems. My main hope is that the new routing system improves the overall efficiency of health and death care assets. And speaking of the assets, can I just gush for a second about the way the assets look? I used to avoid placing cemeteries in my cities, but I think I'm going to be very happy to do so now because I think that they look a ton better. Garbage management has significantly changed in City Skylines 2, and in my opinion, for the better. Beyond what I previously mentioned about sewage creating garbage, the amount of garbage generated per building changes based on zoning type, building level and size, and citizen education level. For example, high-level buildings with highly educated citizens now will generate less garbage. Similar to City Skylines 2 comes with landfills, incineration plants, and recycling centers. However, all of these are significantly improved. For instance, landfills can now be incredibly large with boundaries delineated by players, and they will slowly process garbage, which will generate ground pollution. The incineration plant will burn garbage and as such will create air pollution, which can negatively impact residents that are downwind of these plants. And the recycling center separates garbage from recyclables, turning the recyclables into resources that can be used by manufacturing companies. I love all of these updates, particularly the new landfills, which will operate much more similarly to ones in real life and reflect the physical size that they actually are. Further, I love that the recycling centers produce resources which can be used by your manufacturing industry. That just makes so much sense. It's similar to the Eco Recycling Center, which I used to use in City Skylines for a time. Education and research have substantially changed in City Skylines 2. The game comes with 4 different schools: an elementary school, a high school, college, and a university. All citizens are required to go to elementary school if available, but they will now have the ability to decide whether or not they want to attend other educational options, including high schools. Each citizen will have a predisposition to either pursuing studying or work based upon their interests and will make a choice at each level as to whether it is more beneficial to continue studying or to start working. Further, citizens can now fail to graduate, at which point they will reevaluate their choices and decide whether to continue school or jump right into the workforce. There are 5 levels to education which correspond to the different educational options: uneducated, no formal education; poorly educated, elementary only; educated, high school; well-educated, college; highly educated, university. More highly educated citizens are generally more sought after by employees and are able to fill positions requiring lower education levels, while the inverse is not possible. Similar to City Skylines, each workplace will employ workers across different education levels, and if companies cannot fill positions for certain education levels, their output will be negatively affected. New to City Skylines 2 is that elementary schools will provide a well-being bonus to families with children that live next to them. They will also encourage other families with school-age children to move into the neighborhood. I love this new education mechanic. There's a lot of depth and nuance to it, and I love that. And the new assets look amazing. Initially, I was a little bit concerned about this elementary school. It seemed very, very large, but then I came to realize that it's actually an upgraded elementary school, so it makes a ton of sense that it's this big. And I think the idea of a well-being bonus for families with children that live near an elementary school is absolutely brilliant. Families do want to live next to elementary schools, and oftentimes developers will dedicate land in their new neighborhoods for elementary schools just to attract families to their neighborhoods. So again, this mechanic makes a ton of sense to me, and I'm really excited to see it in the game. The new fire and rescue service should feel familiar to anyone who's played City Skylines using the Natural Disasters DLC. City Skylines 2 comes with the familiar firehouses and fire stations, but adds fire watchtowers, firefighting helicopter depots, early disaster warning systems, and emergency shelters. And unpopular opinion alert, I like the Natural Disasters DLC, and I'm happy to see the assets make their way into City Skylines 2. I am curious about the early disaster warning system though. It sounds like a combination of all the warning systems that were in the Natural Disasters DLC, and I'm really interested in learning more about them. The diary lumps policing and city administration together, but I'm going to take them separately. The policing mechanic shares many similarities to City Skylines with a couple of core changes. Similar to City Skylines, the game comes with police stations and police headquarters. These buildings produce patrol cars, which can either patrol the entire city or be limited to a user-defined area. When citizens are arrested for committing a crime, some will go to jail, while others will be required to serve time in either a local prison or a prison outside of the community if you've not built one in your community just yet. That's right, there are now prisons available in the base game. And interestingly, they serve as both rehabilitation facilities and production facilities, which create resources that can be used by manufacturers. After serving their time, former prisoners will be returned to the community and will be completely rehabilitated. Finally, each building will generate a crime probability that can change based on outside factors such as lack of utilities, pollution, garbage accumulation, and a lack of leisure access. An increased crime probability increases the chance of a citizen becoming a criminal and decreases the overall well-being of all other citizens. And I really think that this policing mechanic seems interesting, particularly the aspect of prisons producing goods, since this is actually what happens in real life. For example, in my state, all license plates are produced at state prisons. Then we're introduced to a new service type, administration buildings, and these include a welfare office, a central bank, and a city hall. That's right, I finally have an office in the city. The welfare office helps boost the citizens' happiness if it's below half, the central bank helps improve business profits by lowering overall costs, and the city hall produces citywide effects such as lowered loan interest rates, reduced crime rates, and reduced building leveling costs. And I'm a little biased, but I really love that city administration finally has a place in the game. It always struck me as odd that for a game that refers to you as the mayor doesn't actually have an office to do their work. Now that's rectified and I couldn't be happier. This does make me wonder though, is the city hall going to be required for policies, and when will those policies unlock, and when will the city hall unlock? We'll have to look for more information on that in a future video. Next, the diary mentions a bit about transportation, but we've already covered all of this in a previous video, so if you want to know more about that, the video is linked above. Gotta say though, this photo of an above ground subway is pretty amazing, absolutely beautiful. Next, the diary goes over parks and recreation buildings, which function very differently than the way they did in City Skylines. In City Skylines 2, they do not directly improve land values, but instead fulfill a citizen's need for leisure. When leisure needs are met, land values can increase. However, leisure needs can be met in a variety of ways, including shopping, restaurants, plazas, sports venues, tourist attractions, and landmarks, in addition to parks. Interestingly, weather and time of year can impact how a citizen chooses to fulfill their leisure needs. So citizens may opt for parks on a nice day and may choose to go to restaurants and shops when it's cold out. Parks and tourist attractions also impact the attractiveness of a city, which can impact the number of tourists that visit a city. The diary mentions that tourists will stay at local hotels and make decisions about the tourist attractions they visit based on their distance from the hotel and the attractiveness of what they're trying to visit. More attractive parks can fulfill a leisure demand faster than less attractive ones. And generally, I really like the way this new mechanic works. It feels smart to have parks competing with other buildings for leisure demands, and I do think people often make trade-offs in real life, such as living near a park or a shopping district, based upon their preferences and how they want to spend their free time. One thing that's interesting is that hotels were mentioned, but not how they work. I'll be curious to find out if they're more similar to the Hotels DLC or the After Dark DLC. Communications is a brand new service category featuring mail delivery services and telecommunications. Mail delivery works the exact same way it did in City Skylines if you had the Industries DLC, and includes post offices and post sorting facilities. Telecommunications are brand new and provide citizens and companies with high-speed internet. Each telecom building has a maximum amount of bandwidth it can provide, and every citizen uses bandwidth at home, school, and at work. Good internet coverage impacts citizens and companies differently. For citizens, it can help fulfill their leisure demand. For businesses, it can allow them to open an online presence and increase profits. It can also help them source cheaper materials, which can also increase profits. Both a server farm and a telecom tower have been confirmed to be in the game to provide telecom coverage. I love the fact that a telecom mechanic has been added to the game. I thought it was missing from City Skylines, and I'm glad to see it in City Skylines too. I am a bit more skeptical about mail delivery. Little was said about whether it was required or not and what benefits it may provide. Mail is critical, and if converted to a game mechanic, could work to deliver packages ordered from online storefronts that businesses can provide once they have telecom coverage. That said, nothing was mentioned about this, so I'll be anxiously looking forward to answers in future updates. And last, but certainly not least, is landscaping. The landscaping tools remain relatively unchanged, with the terraforming tools being identical to those found in City Skylines. However, trees are confirmed to have a life cycle. They'll be planted as saplings and get bigger over time. And if a tree is destroyed as a result of a fire, it will take a long time for new trees to replace the old ones. I love this. Pathways are also found in the landscaping menu as they were before. There are multiple variations of pedestrian bridges, and similar to City Skylines, citizens will opt to walk if the path is more convenient than other modes of transportation. What's new is that citizens will save money if they do this, which can be spent elsewhere, such as upgrading their homes. And personally, I thought that the landscaping tools in City Skylines were perfect, and I'm glad to see that very little has changed. And of the things that have changed, I love the added depth. For instance, planting saplings will make a new neighborhood feel as though it's new, and as the trees get bigger, you'll see the neighborhood become more established along with it. And I love that mature trees don't just snap back after a fire. It's going to make fires absolutely devastating, and I think it's going to invoke an emotional response in me at least. I also love that there are multiple options for pedestrian bridges. As I mentioned in a previous video, pedestrian bridges are often landmarks within cities and places where a city can express its character and its values, so I love this. Next, the diary covers service upgrades. City services can be upgraded, which will allow them to either expand capacity or add new services. For example, a medical clinic can have an ambulance depot added to it, a school can have its capacity increased by adding a playground, and a power plant can reduce the pollution it generates by adding an exhaust filter. Upgrades come in 3 different types: operational, extensions, and sub-buildings. Operational upgrades add functionality to the buildings, but they will look the exact same as they did before the upgrade. An example of this is adding a dispatch center to a taxi depot. Extensions are upgrades that are connected to the main building. They will usually upgrade the capacity for the number of vehicles the building has, the range that it can serve, its output, or the number of citizens that it can serve. Extensions have fixed positions and occur entirely within the existing lot. And lastly, sub-buildings are standalone buildings that are attached to an existing lot. These can increase the capacity or functionality of a building, but require additional space to be built. So planning ahead for the buildings that have sub-buildings is going to be very important. These upgrades all come at a cost and will increase maintenance. And in some cases, it may be preferential to add another service building since it'll reduce overall traffic congestion. I love everything about this. The ability to upgrade buildings was the very best feature in SimCity 2013, and it's always grinded my gears that City Skylines kind of took a step backwards and encourages you to spam buildings rather than upgrade them. In reality, citizens often expand buildings rather than building new ones since it cuts down on duplicative positions and costs. And when new city service buildings are added, it's usually because there are clear logistical benefits. And it seems like City Skylines 2 threads this needle nicely, and I can't wait to try the feature out. Next up is service coverage. Service buildings now provide both simulated and passive coverage effects, and I promise this isn't as complicated as it sounds. Simulated coverage effects are the overall citywide benefit a service building provides as its vehicles patrol the city or citizens visit the service building. Passive coverage effects are bonuses for locating close to a service building, such as increased health or decreased fire hazard. The passive coverage effect can vary depending on 3 factors: range, capacity, and magnitude. Range is the distance the effect works from the building, capacity is the reach based on the number of people that can be served, and the magnitude is the amount of the effect that can be gained based on the location of the service. The further you are from a service building, the less effective the passive effect will be. I love the sound of this, particularly the passive coverage effect. I think we're going to have to be very strategic about where we place our service buildings, and I really like that. Next is service efficiency. Throughout this diary and the ones that came before it, efficiency has been mentioned for businesses and services. Basically, efficiency is how well the building performs its basic functions. Efficiency has an impact on the building's capacity, its processing speed, and its output, and may even impact its passive service coverage. The following can be impacted by efficiency: electricity, water and sewage, health and death care, garbage management, education and research, fire and rescue, police, transportation, parks and rec, and communications. Utility availability, resource availability, and city service budgets can all have an impact on efficiency, as can having all positions filled and employees being happy. This mechanic generally sounds very similar to City Skylines, but I'm really happy to see it spelled out so plainly right up front. I think it's going to be much more easy to troubleshoot your cities as a result. Then we have service fees. Citizens and businesses now have to pay for a variety of city services, including utilities, roads, healthcare, garbage management, education, and transportation. The economy panel allows users to adjust the budget and fee for each of the services. This menu will also display important export costs and revenues. Lower service fees can increase happiness and profitability, but will place increased strain on the systems as utilization for those services increases. However, district policies can help offset this bad behavior. I love this. All places are different, but in my state, much of this is broken out on your property tax bill. And local governments are always trying to find ways to keep budgets balanced, and it seems like the game is going to provide you the ability to do this if you'd like to. Next is a very exciting one: service trade. Services can now be purchased or sold to neighbors, and citizens will travel to outside areas for services that you are not providing. For example, electricity, water, and sewage can be imported or exported. But it doesn't end there. Medical facilities, police, and fire services can all be provided by outside connections. However, their service response times will be slow and all passive benefits will be missing. Citizens will also go to colleges or universities outside of your city, but that may cause them to move out for good. The inverse is also true. Your colleges and universities can attract citizens from outside of your city, and they may opt to live in your city permanently. We know all about this here in Madison. And I love that we can finally trade services. This is a feature that was common in SimCity games, and I've always missed it in City Skylines. But I may be most excited about the ability to create a true college town, where there are fewer citizens than students. This was impossible in City Skylines, since your universities can only educate your citizens. And finally, we have districts and policies. Districts appear to work very similar to the way they did in City Skylines. However, you can now see the benefits and drawbacks of a particular area, which can give you an idea of how to improve a district. Placing districts is, in a word, fixed. Rather than painting a district, you'll now be able to place nodes to create a polygon. Additional nodes can be added to change the shape of a district in the future if desired. As has been mentioned, city services can be limited to a specific district. However, passive effects will still only apply to the neighborhood the service is placed in. There are 7 district policies and 5 city policies in City Skylines 2. The district policies include a combustion engine ban, energy consumption awareness, gated communities, heavy traffic ban, recycling, roadside parking fees, and speed bumps. City policies include advanced pollution management, city promotion, high-speed highways, pre-release program, and minimum taxi fares. The new districting tool is exactly what I've been looking for. It's going to be so much cleaner to place districts, and they're not going to overlap quite as much. And generally, though there are fewer policies, they appear to be more targeted and well thought out. I appreciate that city policies have been separated from district policies, since some are not appropriate at the district level and vice versa. And before we move on to my final thoughts, let's take a look at the feature highlight video. First up, we get to see Heisenberg walking his dog without a leash, and I find that to be really funny. But what I really like about this is that we're looking at what appears to be a pedestrian facility or a quay wall right along the water, and it has this really nice park-like atmosphere. It's really attractive. And then we get to prominently see a helicopter again, so I really want to know what role these play in the game. And then we get another look at some industrial assets, and boy, oh boy, do they look good. Even the smoke, just looks really outstanding. In this shot, I want to point out the bridges. It looks like there are 3 different bridge options that are shown. We get this really ornate bridge and then some other more modern looking bridges. Really great to see all of the options available to us. Now in this shot, we get to see that there are 4 different healthcare buildings available. And I think it's pretty easy to see that this is a clinic and this is potentially a hospital. I'm not sure what this is. Maybe this is the Medical Research Institute, but there are 4, so I'm really curious about what those could be. If you have an idea, drop it down in the comments. And then I want to point out this crematorium. This is a really attractive looking building. Contrasting it to the old crematorium, this looks so much better, so much more realistic. I love it. And then we get a view of this cemetery, and wow, does it look nice compared to the cemeteries in City Skylines 1. Honestly, it's very park-like and serene, which I really, really appreciate. The one thing I am curious about is if you look at the grave sites, it's a very specific type of grave site. It's the kind that you see in areas that have high water tables. So where I live, you don't see those. That would be kind of strange to see. So I'm curious to know if that is modifiable or if that's how they are. I'm guessing it's how they are in all of the cities, but just curious. And then we see this elementary school, and it is very attractive. It is also very large, and the building is kind of specific to certain areas. This makes me wonder. Building variations have not really been talked about, but they were introduced as part of the Plazas and Promenades DLC, and I'm wondering if for buildings like this, we're going to eventually see building variations so that instead of having a red roof, you have a black roof, or, a terracotta roof, depending on the type of place that you're in. And then we get to see this building, and the audio specifies that this is actually a college. Now, when I first looked at this, to me, it looked like a high school. There are many high schools in my area that look exactly like this. So very curious to know more about this and what the colleges offer beyond just this building. I'm also curious to know, is the football stadium behind it an upgrade, or is it an asset that's been placed on a road? Same thing with the soccer pitch behind that. I'm guessing that is a specific park, but we're gonna have to wait to see and learn more down the line. And this is a university, which makes me even more curious to know more information about the college because the university is absolutely massive. And looking at this, I can't help but wonder if this is a fully upgraded university, knowing that most city services are upgradable, or if this is the way it comes by default and you can't upgrade anything. But generally, what a beautiful asset. And then I just want to stop for a moment to take a look at this education info view because I think we see some really interesting things here. First of all, the dev diary talked about citizens being able to make a choice between going to school and not. And you see that happening with the high schools. What we're seeing is that there are 342 teens that are eligible to go to high school, and only 235 are actually going. So that's a pretty significant number of kids that are deciding, I'm not going to high school. But for elementary schools, we see that everyone's going and there's actually not enough capacity. And then for college and university, we're seeing something very similar. There's a certain number of eligible people who are deciding not to go. So very interested in learning more about this and ways that we can maybe influence people to go to high school and go to college and university. We'll have to see how that works in the future. And I believe that this is our welfare office, and it looks like a pretty generic city services building. I like that about it. The one thing, as I look at all these buildings that have trees and knowing that trees have a life cycle, I'm curious whether the trees that are included as part of buildings have life cycles or not, because they look pretty uniform right now. If this were just plopped, maybe that would be the case, but over time, are the trees going to die at different times and be replaced at different times? We'll have to find out. And then we get this B-roll along the water, and we're seeing that there is what appears to be maybe a hot dog stand by the water and some fences here. Very curious to know what we're looking at, but this looks like a very interesting and active pedestrian area. Oh, you see what this is? This is a dog park. So dog parks are confirmed to be a park type. Thank goodness. Love it. And here we're getting our first look at the leisure menu, and I am very interested in knowing more about this menu. You can see that there are leisure activities, and I'm guessing that is shops and restaurants. We're also seeing parks, and they are separated in this menu. So this is going to be a very interesting one to take a look at. It looks like the park coverage is shown on the roads. So I am curious if the leisure activities actually impact that as well, or if that is just park coverage. We're going to have to wait and find out. Wow, this is an interesting monument. It kind of looks like a monk staring at a basketball while holding a book, standing on the base of the Statue of Liberty. So very interested in knowing more about this. I'm assuming that this is a tourist attraction. It is very large. It's just kind of interesting. I'm not sure what it's modeled after. If this is based on a real landmark, please let me know what it is down in the comments. Oh, and look at this. We're confirming a little bit of Verde Beach action. We see some fires. Here we get to see our fire and rescue info view, and look at this. We get to see some of our assets, and they honestly look a ton better than in City Skylines. Very traditional in terms of the architecture. This does make me very curious. Are there different architectural styles for some of these service buildings based on whether you have a North American or a European build? This looks very North American to me. It looks very familiar, but I'm not sure that it would look so familiar in a European build. We'll have to see. We can also see that there are a number of things in the legend here. Everything is on, so it's a little difficult to make sense of what we're looking at, but it's good to see that we have so many different options of things that we can toggle to see if we have overlapping coverages. And here we get a look at our police info view, and we get to see some of the assets that we have available to us. Right here, it looks like a small police station, maybe our police headquarters. Then I thought that this was our prison, and I'm not sure what this is. So I'm really curious to know more about that. Maybe this is a standalone jail right here, and this is the prison. And then taking a look over here, we get to see our jail availability and our prison availability. It's interesting. It says sentence. That makes me think that maybe there is some sort of courthouse, because you can't get sentenced unless you go to a courthouse. And then we get to see our average crime probability and some statistics that I'm guessing police would love to see, the number of current criminals in the city. And then our crime success rate, 39.4%. So I guess there are attempted crimes that can be thwarted. So that's very interesting. Here we get to see our telecommunications coverage. And this is really interesting. This is something that I was really hoping would be added to the game. It's implemented differently than I would have thought, but I think it actually makes more sense. So I was assuming that there would be an internet service that you could plop in the city, and then maybe you'd have to add cell towers. It seems like those have been combined, which simplifies things, and I really like it. And you can see why the quality is what it is. It looks like this right here is one of our telecom towers, and it's providing coverage to this general area, and the rest of the place doesn't appear to have coverage. Now, interestingly, we're seeing that there are 4 different options underneath our telecom menu. What looks like a small tower. I believe that this is our server farm. This must be a larger version of that tower to emanate the internet out to your city. And then we have this satellite tower. So I'm very curious to see what the coverage and cost is for each of these. Wow, this is $1 million. And I know money is different in City Skylines too, but that is very, very expensive. And I'm very curious about the capacity, the bandwidth capacity, because that's something that we're not really seeing here. We're seeing network quality, but the dev diary referenced a bandwidth capacity that every citizen would use. This also confirms that I was incorrect in the previous diary where I thought that maybe these were natural disaster buildings. These are very clearly telecommunications buildings, and they're very attractive. I am curious though, because these are not natural disaster buildings, if we're going to have lightning strikes like we had with the Natural Disasters DLC, and if these things can be taken out by a natural disaster. And then we're going to take a look at our electricity info views, and there are a number of things to unpack here. First of all, I think we get looking at a substation being placed. This is what you need to be able to take power from an outside connection and convert it to something that can be usable by your citizens. So it's very interesting to see. But what I'm really interested in is this right here. This to me looks like the power lines that you would see in a rural area, and I was under the impression that those weren't actually in the game. We also see right here low voltage electric cables, which again makes me think that we have some of those low voltage electric cables on rural roads. Interestingly, we're also seeing bottlenecks here, which makes me think that there's a lot of depth to this mechanic. So maybe you have to have parallel distribution lines if you have too much electricity flowing through a specific area. Very interested in learning more about this next week. And then we're also getting a little image of all of our power plants. We have wind right here. I'm guessing that this is coal and gas. Maybe this is solar. We have nuclear here. I am not sure what this is. Maybe this is geothermal. This is very clearly hydroelectric. I don't know what this is either, nor this, but very interested in finding out more about these. It's very, very nice to see that there is extra depth to this mechanic than we had initially thought, or at least that I initially thought. Here we're getting our first view of a solar plant, and boy, oh boy, is this absolutely stunning. This looks a lot like the solar plant that I actually created in Clearwater County, and I'm just in love with this. This is amazing. And looking at this, I'm guessing that this is a gas power plant, a natural gas power plant. It kind of has the pipes along the ground and a couple of what appear to be LP tanks. It just kind of has that natural gas look about it, and it looks really, really good. Here we have a coal power plant, and we get to see a little bit of information about it. The upkeep is 50 grand a month, so that is really expensive if it were City Skylines 1 numbers. Apparently not that expensive in City Skylines 2. We also get to see the coal storage, and I'm guessing we can increase the capacity. There's actually, I know that we can, based on what the dev diary said. And we get to see that there are actually 4 upgrades here. So it appears that we can add another turbine, maybe we can add additional fuel capacity and some filters for this. So a lot that we can do to increase the capacity of this. I am very curious to know though, how much this will actually improve the capacity. We can also see that the efficiency of this building is very bad. I'm amazed that it's operating at 25% efficiency with only 1 employee. It's pretty funny, but it's interesting to see all of this. Also, noise, ground, and air pollution very high from this building. And then we have this shot where I think we're seeing a nuclear power plant and some wastewater treatment, and it just looks, I mean, the scale of everything here is amazing. There's a landfill behind it. It really feels like a massive campus, which I think is something that we were sorely missing in City Skylines. And here we get to take a look at a river of poo. It looks even more disgusting than it did in City Skylines, which I think is really impressive. It's going to be a great incentive never to use the water outlet pipe. And there it is, our nemesis, the ability to dump raw sewage right into the water. And I'd say it is confirmed these do not need roads. This person is going to leave this door and fall right into the river of poo. And then we get to our water and sewage info view, and there are a couple of interesting things to unpack here. First of all, you can see that water and sewage pipes are still in the game. There's even a combined pipe, and I think that the purpose of these is to connect to outside connections or to link up different cities in your region, assuming you want to share utilities. If you take a look at the highway here, it doesn't look like there's water or sewage underneath it. So I'm guessing that if you wanted to make that connection, you'd have to place your own pipes manually or connect a local road between the two communities, which could be very strange. And then we get to see some of our water and sewage options here. So I'm guessing that this right here is one of the pumps that you can use to pump fresh water out of an open water source. Right here is a water tower, so I'm guessing the capacity is low, but you could pump out of a groundwater source. And I'm guessing that this is the high capacity variant of the same thing. Not sure what this is. I'm wondering if this is a desalination plant, if that is an option. They haven't really specified that, but it would make sense that you would have something like this so you could pump a large quantity of water out of an open water source. This looks like it is the sewage outlet if you wanted to pump raw sewage into your open water bodies. And then this right here is what is being placed. Looks like a very traditional water treatment facility. And actually, now that I look at this, it's not desalination. I'm guessing that this is actually one of those inland water treatment facilities. And then we're seeing something about water trade in this menu as well. You can see that New Dollarton is importing a ton of water, but it looks like it's a bad thing, and I don't think it actually should. So I'm wondering if this is going to be changed before the final release, because if you're importing, you should probably be right in the middle, but it looks like it's a bad thing. And then we have the water availability. The consumption is quite a bit higher than the output, but if you're importing, I would again assume that that would be right in the middle. So we'll have to see how that changes. And then we get a shot of this water processing facility that was just placed, and it is absolutely wonderful. The scaling is very nice, and it looks very custom. It looks like these are offset from the building itself. And this right here is another interesting view. This is only on the screen for a split second, but it is your garbage management info view. You get to see all the different options that are available to you, including what appears to be changing the size of your landfill using nodes. So you'd adjust the polygon by adding a node. Really love the way that trash management is handled in this game. It just makes so much more sense. And we can see that this landfill is being placed, and then the boundaries of the actual landfill area are being set. This is the same way that the district tool is going to work now, and I just love it. It makes so much sense. It's so much cleaner than the old version, and now you can actually have facilities that are reasonable sizes. So this, I believe, is our landfill. This is our incinerator. This is our recycling plant. And then this is something else. And I'm not 100% sure what it is. Maybe it's a larger recycling center. I am curious with our recycling centers if we're going to need to place a landfill around it. That is going to be something. Because otherwise, I'm not sure what you would do with the extra trash. Because the way it sounds in the dev diary, it processes the recyclables that it can, and then the rest is garbage. So do you need a landfill with a recycling center, or can you build a landfill around the recycling center? We'll have to wait and find out about that one. And this might be the answer. This appears to be a recycling center with a landfill around it. But again, I just don't know that we can say for certain that this landfill was drawn around the recycling center. Now, this is a very interesting view to me because what we're seeing are multiple recycling facilities. So I'm guessing that this is a gigantic landfill. This looks like it's about the same. So maybe it's another landfill, or actually this is probably that recycling center that we were looking at. And then we have another one of these. Maybe, I'm not sure what this is. Maybe it's an add-on to one of these facilities. This appears to be an add-on to our landfill. So this right here is it's showing in green that it's garbage trucks. So this must be a facility to increase the garbage truck capacity of the landfill. And maybe this is another support facility, a processing facility for the landfill. Maybe you can increase the processing status, because we see right here that you can process a certain amount per month, and having these buildings might be a way to actually make it process faster. And then I think that this also demonstrates the way that you're able to add on to facilities. So this was mentioned in the dev diary. You can add on to services by either increasing the capacity of the building, adding a wing onto it, or adding another support, building a sub building on. And that's what this appears to be demonstrating to me. I'm guessing that this is a sub building, as is this one, and then this is another service building altogether. One more thing I want to point out here, it looks like this is a wastewater treatment facility, and you can see that the garbage accumulation for this building is high, which I think is a demonstration of the new functionality that's been added to the game where the solids need to be landfilled, which makes a ton of sense to me. And then we get to take a look at some of our pollution info views. So first of all, we're getting to take a look at our air pollution, which is very interesting. We get to see where the air quality is good and where it's bad and where areas are being impacted. We can also see that we get air pollution from traffic, which I think is very interesting. That hasn't been mentioned before, but that is a very significant source of air pollution in some areas. So it's good to see that factored in. And then here we get to see our water pollution. And it's interesting to see that in some of these cases, the overlap is not necessarily one for one. So here's our air pollution, and then we would take a look at our water pollution. It actually extends further out. And I'm guessing that's because this is a large groundwater deposit, and the little bit of pollution over here is polluting the entire deposit. So again, that's a demonstration of how careful we're going to have to be when we're planning out our industrial uses, because you could very easily pollute an entire groundwater source. I am wondering if there are ways to clean this up, or if once you pollute a groundwater source, it is polluted forever. And then over here, we're seeing what appears to be a very large groundwater deposit. I am curious, do these deplete over time, or if you have one, does it just keep replenishing as rain occurs? And then here we get to see buildings that are actively unhappy about the air pollution. And I'm very curious, it appears that they're not abandoning. So does this just mean that the people who live here are unhappy and you have to have a welfare office nearby to keep them happy? Or will their lifespans be cut short? Very, very curious about that. Now here we get to see our education info view, and there's a couple of interesting things in here. First of all, it looks like this is our elementary school, and the building that was called a college earlier on in the trailer, it looks like that is a high school. So my earlier suspicions could be correct. And then we have this building right here, which I'm guessing is a college, and this one, which I'm guessing is a university, unless these are both colleges and this right here is a university. There are more options than I guess I was expecting to see here. So I'm not exactly sure 100% what we're looking at. I'm guessing though, we do see schools and research facilities. So maybe these right here are research facilities, and this is our university, and this is our college. Not 100% sure. And now we get to see our elementary school upgrade menu. Couple of interesting things right here. It appears that this is maybe the child health center that was referenced in the dev diary. I'm guessing that these are the wings that you can add to the side of the school to increase capacity. And then this is the playground that can also increase the capacity. Now, one of the things I'm really interested in is we're seeing that the average time to graduation. So I'm guessing that if a school is underperforming, if your efficiency is bad, the average time to graduation increases. But I'm very curious to know more about that. It's also interesting to see that there is a dropout rate for elementary school. Wouldn't have expected to see that, but I'm curious to see how that plays into the game mechanics. Now here we're actually seeing the elementary school get upgraded, and it looks like those wings add 500 capacity to the school. So that is a pretty significant upgrade, and it really makes a difference in terms of the way that the building itself looks. Really feels like a very urban, very large elementary school. It also increases the noise pollution, because we see that as it's a small school, it has very low noise pollution. When you upgrade it, even though the citizens love it, we're seeing that the noise pollution goes up quite dramatically. And here we get to see our hospital upgrade menu, and I think we have a couple of interesting answers in here. First of all, I think that what we're seeing is that you can actually upgrade a hospital to have a helicopter landing pad right in the top. So that's probably where all of those helicopters are coming from, the hospital. We're also seeing that there is a wing that you can add to the hospital, and I'm not sure what this is, but there are 3 different options to upgrade your hospitals. We're also seeing that every hospital has a storage amount for pharmaceuticals. So that was mentioned in the previous dev diary, that you can manufacture pharmaceuticals as part of the whole supply chain. So obviously this city is struggling a bit with that, or this hospital's brand new, one of the two. But boy, oh boy, the upkeep of this building is mammoth. When you compare this to, say, that power plant, I want to say that this is something like 8 times more expensive. So it's very, very, very expensive. And here we get to take a look at our city budget, and I just love how clearly laid out this is. You get to easily see your revenues and your expenses and try to balance your budget if that's something that you want to do. The other thing that's interesting to me about this is that we're seeing government subsidies. That is a real thing in reality. Where I live, local governments receive subsidies from state governments and the federal government. Not sure what that exactly means in this game, or if it even means government subsidies like I think of them. We're also seeing that we have subsidies listed under expenses. So my guess is that is things like tax increment financing, probably not actually tax increment financing, but subsidies that you would provide to businesses to locate in your community. That was kind of hinted at in previous diaries. It's also very interesting to see loan interest. So there was a little bit of insinuation that your city hall could impact loan interest. And I'm curious about that, because in reality, governments do build infrastructure when loan interest is low. It's really cost effective, if you know that the interest rates are very low, to build a large building that you know that you're going to need to build. And then in times like now where interest rates are pretty high, maybe you pump the brakes on those expenses and use the revenues that you're generating during those down times to pay off those loans that you got during the good times. We're also seeing our service fees and our service trade in here, and it's actually a pretty significant portion of this budget, so that's very interesting as well. And in this tab, we are seeing our expenses for each of our services, and you can see that health and death care is just so much higher than anything else. Trash management, fire and rescue are also very high, but nothing is anywhere near the cost of health and death care. Truthfully, that kind of makes sense. It's very expensive. There's one more interesting thing that I see in this menu, and it is that this is New Teelan. So I'm guessing that Biffa put this together. I haven't watched his video yet, but I'm guessing that this is his. So it's awesome to see another City Skylines YouTuber with access to the game. And with that, let's move on to my final thoughts. As I mentioned at the start, I think there's little to take issue with regards to city services and City Skylines 2. Across the board, there have been significant improvements in terms of functionality, scaling, and the general look of the assets. I'm super excited for the service trading mechanic, and I was really pleasantly surprised to see medical, police, fire, and educational services able to be traded in the game. But what do you think about the new services? What are you the most excited about? Is there anything you wish would have been added? Let me know down in the comments. Or if you're feeling bashful, consider dropping an emoji for the sake of engagement, and hit the like button if you enjoyed the video. Thanks again for joining me on another one of these deep dives, and remember, we're doing this every Monday until City Skylines 2 comes out. Thanks for joining me, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.